Hello and welcome to another LinkedIn Live with myself, Garth Sharif, and I'm glad you could be back. Keeping this Cal Ripken streak alive with LinkedIn Lives on Tuesday, 9 o'clock Eastern Time. Today, generative AI and intellectual property. I know there's a lot of discussion around generative AI and ChatGPT and DALI and other generative AI solutions. So I will maybe take a pause after this episode and go into some other areas that I speak to. But there's still a lot of things to mine here in terms of understanding content, application, challenges, and so it's again it is revolutionary, ChatGPT. So the space, the media space, the conversational space is warranted in terms of how people are talking about this. It really is next level in terms of deep learning, machine learning, and how we can practically use artificial intelligence. And that's what I wanted to talk about today, because this one this one is a little bit more of, I never want to put water onto this in a sense that I don't want to cool off the buzz around this, because I am someone who sees the value in generative AI and the application and the future use for CPAs and other professionals, and then the personal use for it. Obviously, the things that can go wrong in terms of how we use this and where the information is coming from, the reliability or veracity of the information, those are all important things to talk about. But no doubt, this is absolutely going to be something that we're going to be using in our personal and professional lives. But as we're learning more about generative AI, I did want to bring up a particular topic that's close, near and dear to my heart, on intellectual property. And why this is near and dear to my heart is, I am a CPA. I've worked as a CPA for well over 20 years. But in between my CPA career, I decided to venture into a different category of career. I went into the arts, into theater and film, to act for a few years, and it was very, I really enjoyed that time of my life. It was a struggle, for sure, because acting and the arts is it's a hustle, it's work, it's tough, it doesn't pay sometimes, and it is a lot of work. It's just a lot of effort, and then when you're actually on the stage, on camera or behind the scenes, it's intense. And so I enjoyed meeting other actors, directors, screenwriters, playwrights, learning, failing, trying to get better. A lot of what I do now in professional speaking, I think the tools came from that time of my life, so I'm very grateful for it. Even though it was hard. It was hard to have a career 10 years in professional accounting and then move into a space that I always loved and always wanted to try, which is acting. And I'm proud that I did it. It was difficult, but a lot of the skills that I learned from that are transferable. But what that informed me of is that the life of an artist, the creativity and content. And again, artists don't always get paid the most amount of money compared to other professions. Obviously, if you want to take a look at Hollywood or some of the most influential artists right now, they're getting paid quite a bit. But when we talk about just as a group of workers, they don't always get paid what they're worth, and that's just the way we value services, and I don't always agree with that. Uh, but one of the things that's really important for an actor, for an artist, painter, a musician, whatever it might be, is intellectual control of the content they create. And that's really what's the driver of this topic. It's not just artists, but when we use generative AI, and it does amazing things. I'm going to go through a New York Times article that just came out, I think, over the weekend. 35 ways real people are using ChatGPT. It's amazing. It really is. You just go and you read the article. I'll go through several of them, and you'll go, "Wow, that's amazing." But what we want to do, especially as professionals, or CPA, lawyer, accounting, finance, is again not to throw cold water on this, not just water, cold water, just to take a step back and ask a few reflective questions, because there's the legality of how machine learning works, because machine learning is not creating content, it's mining content that it gets from other places. And when we talk about works of art, poetry, writing, research, it's taking information from something that already exists that it has access to. And a question would be, what's the rights of that individual whose information is the source information for ChatGPT? And that gives me again my emotional side of me thinks we have to protect artists, we have to protect painters, musicians, actors, any content creator, because that is their livelihood, and they already struggle to make a living. And if we start to take their work and throw it into these algorithms, I think that hurts already a struggling industry with artists and creative types. But not to say that there isn't some solution to that, but we as end users want to be cognizant of it from the emotional standpoint, where we want to protect our artists because they're important for our culture and what we do and what we love in terms of going to theater, going to the symphony, watching a movie, going to an art show, whatever it might be. We want to support that. It's a big part of what what makes our culture is the arts. But then there's also the professional ethics and legality of it all. When we talk about using these tools, which we should use, but always just think, what am I getting? Where is it coming from? And this has been something that's of top of mind for me as I use ChatGPT. Even in fact, I use DALL-E to create art. So DALL-E is also part of OpenAI. It creates artwork, whatever you want, graffiti of this city landscape, a Mad Magazine image of an apple tree with squirrels. I don't know. I'm just improvising here poorly, but it will present something to you. And the question with DALL-E is, where is it getting that information? Where is it getting the sort of the bits and pieces to build its own art? And is it art if it's taking art from other people and just reconstituting it? And these are complicated questions. These are not questions that are easy. But I think as end users, and even myself at the beginning, I was like, well, I'll just take this art and I won't use stock Adobe Stock, which is what I use for images, where the artist has agreed to have their image or their art, the photo or painting or whatever it might be, licensed if you're on Adobe Stock, and they get a royalty. Oh, and now I can use DALL-E for images for LinkedIn and for my website or whatever else. And even I got caught up into thinking, okay, well, wait a minute now, this is for free. Where is this? Where is the intellectual property? Where is this being mined from? And so it's easy to get caught up in this and not necessarily think about both the emotional aspect of, are we taking content from others and not giving them, any credit or remuneration? And two, is that it's the emotional side of it. Is that right? And so here's the article that I linked in the LinkedIn post called "Generative AI Has an Intellectual Property Problem." And it's a really good article. And again, I don't think it's throwing cold water on the use of generative AI. What it's doing, it's asking you to think about some things. And really, if you go to the key parts of this article, I mean, the entire article is important to read, but what are the responsibility of developers around making sure the content and the big data pool that generative AI is using to build its responses, where is the attribution? If it is taking it from, common licensed material, fine. But if it's taking it from licensed material that you're, is it a question of if it's just a little piece of this and a little piece of that? Is it still the artist's work? Developers have a responsibility here to do that and to think about that. Then you have creators. As I said before, I might go into DALL-E to create something, a logo and some sort of artwork for a LinkedIn Live, for a website, and that would put me under the creator space. Maybe I want to create a blog article. Maybe I want to create a form for some sort of use in one of my courses. And these are all good uses, and we'll go through the 35 ways in which people are using ChatGPT from the New York Times. But this article goes into saying, okay, as creators, if we're creating content, just understand what the content is. And also, if you are a creator, if you're putting content out there that's like your artwork, your writing, you want to be aware of maybe if you see your work, if you um, have any indication that a generative AI is using your work, that you understand how it's being used, and maybe if it should be used that way. And here is where I think most of my audience that I talk to reside in businesses. In terms of how businesses can use generative AI, there's a lot of different ways. The biggest thing for generative AI in businesses, if you're an organization, a firm, a sole proprietor, whatever it might be, is to understand what the policies are of the generative AI provider in terms of how they're getting their contact and content, and if they have licenses to the content, and if they're taking the 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 results of you using content that isn't licensed, that's on their liability, not yours. Again, that's more of the legality of it. I think the emotional part of it is that you would hope the information in ChatGPT or other generative AI would give you some comfort in where the content is being sourced. But that's the relationship that you might have with the generative AI software or platform that you're using. But the other part is just to just step back and think, is this content potentially someone else's? Both from a legal point of view, but also, again, as an artist, as someone who worked in this space. Um, are we taking someone else's work, even if it's transformed in some way? And what do we think about that? If they're not getting any remuneration or any credit. So it's just something to think about, because it is very easy to create content with ChatGPT. And again, I'm not arguing that ChatGPT uh, shouldn't be used because of this. It's just something that we have to take a step back and think about. So this is a fantastic article, 35 ways real people are using AI right now. And really, we're talking about generative AI. And this was published on April 14th in the New York Times. Francesca Paris and Larry Buchanan. I'll put a link in my stream to the article. But this is a great article. Now, what I did as a sort of a sample with this was just to go through and just think, is there any sort of emotional, where is this coming from, sort of quandary in how we're seeing the different uses. And again, this is not necessarily a yes or no answer. I'm not an adjudicator here. Yes, this is infringement. No, this is not. But it's just to look at this article a little bit different, because you can look at it and say, wow, that's interesting. That's something I didn't think about. That might be something I might do myself. But I think in the background, you want to just give pause to, where is this information coming from. So we won't go through all 35, but we'll go through a few of them. So planting gardens. This is using it for high ultra density planting arrangement. So the question here, that's very interesting, right? Because you can use ChatGPT for this. Where is that information coming from? Are high density planting arrangements an artistic sort of thought, or is it just fair game? Is it anything that ChatGPT is mining? Is not necessarily attributable to somebody working in garden planting. I'm sure there's a more specific term for those that plan gardens. So just thinking it through, planning workouts. Now this is interesting, right? Because workouts would maybe, and again, I'm not speaking from a legal point of view, be in the common space, because there's so many workout plans. And um, is workout plans an intellectual property? It can be, right? If it's a very specific program, if it has a part of it that's innovative and has a trademark or patent, yes. If it's just putting together a routine using very widely known exercises, probably not. So this would be a good way. Again, I'm not saying it's not without some thought here, but on the face of it, planning a workout probably doesn't really have a point where you think, am I infringing on someone else's intellectual property? Now, again, none of these are really um, business uses yet, unless you are someone who's a personal trainer. Planning meals, again, maybe that's a very interesting way of not having to worry about what you're going to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Get ChatGPT to do it. Making a gift. Now, this is where we get into um, a little bit more of a question because anytime DALL-E is involved to generate images, this is where I would say, okay, if it's a personal use, and by the way, amazing image, but remember, this is the key to generative AI. It's not creating this on its own. It's using a repository of information that's already existing, and obviously bringing it together in a unique way because this piece doesn't exist out there. No artist has created this exact piece like this. This is unique art created by Dali, but it is not thinking for itself. It's taking the query, looking at all the available resources, and in its infinite speed, putting together something like this. So this one, I think Dali. It depends. Again, if you want to read the fine print behind Dali, that would be important. Design parts for spaceships. Sure, that's an interesting one. Again, depends on if any of the items for this are part of an IP. Organize a messy laptop. Write a wedding speech. So this is about writing. So writing a wedding speech you might say that's interesting, right? I can give it some direction about the bride or groom, and it can again. Personally, I think you lose a little bit of what makes us like. I love the other ones. I love 1 through 6. I think writing a wedding speech kind of farms out something that's supposed to be a personal message as best man or the maid of honor. This personal thought here that this might not be something I would do because maybe use it in some way, but not all the way. But again, that's just personal thought, um, not necessarily something that should be done. Now, here's an interesting one. Write an email. Okay, so this one, you might say, I need a mid-sized summary email written pertaining to data not being given to us on in time. Again, as someone who works in communication, this is pertaining to data not being given to us in time. That's something that seems like a conflict. And generative AI might be pretty good at figuring out ways of writing, but one thing it won't know unless you start to give it more information, which you could, is who's it writing for. So if I was using this, I might actually write this. The individual I'm writing to is using Myers-Briggs, using social styles, is this type of communication. Using DISC uh, is a big I little d, and it might actually write the email in the way that that person receiving it would be most likely to be receptive. So again, that's just adding some context to it. So yeah, that's a very interesting way. If you feel like writing emails take time, or you don't want, you're struggling with the wording, getting a first read. Again, I don't see any issues here. Playing devil's advocate. So as we continue down this, here we go. Build a clock that gives you a new poem every minute. Now, again, this might not be a business reason in for example, in the space that I'm in, the CPA space. The clock strikes 1:38. Afternoon shines bright with fate. Fantastic. Now, again, we don't know if there is something that is similar in the rhythm or the construction of this poem that has been changed, but hasn't been changed enough. So then it becomes, how do you use this? Is this something that you use, just as a personal item that you share with a few friends, or is this part of what you use in a business? Do you make a poster out of this? Do you make this your mission statement? It's, again, I don't know if you'd make this your mission statement, but the challenge here is anytime it writes something with creativity, we want to think about this. Organize research for a thesis. And the organization is good if you're already giving it some context to organize your work. Skim dozens of academic articles. cope with ADHD because it can help to outline and structure. So these are all really I highly encourage you to read this article. Actually, let me just see if I can just add it now, because it is very, very good in terms of things that I didn't even think about. Like one of the coolest things, I'll just scroll down here, was design 3D games. Not just games. There's one where it designed yeah, a Pong, so you can go back and you can actually it writes code, and you don't have to know anything about code. But this individual tried to recreate an old 3D game from his childhood. He had to use not just ChatGPT, but something else called Claude. And eventually, not knowing code, it was able to um, it was able to recreate it, which is unbelievable. I found the article. I'm going to post it to LinkedIn. So that's really, to me, really neat stuff. And I think that's the type of usage that gets us really interested. Now, here's the thing. The next one down. Let's just go build entirely new games. So here is the thing. This is a really interesting question, right? Can you create me a puzzle game like Sudoku? When that title here, the title is build entirely new games. Technically, ChatGPT cannot build something entirely new. It can reconstitute, reimagine, change things that already exist in a way that is new. But like origination, like coming up with a game like Sudoku is different from coming up with Sudoku. Something like that was has some basis in other games, but is really unique on itself. You might ask, all artists sometimes draw on other work from the past, but this is still not human innovation. So this one would be interesting because if you create a puzzle game like Sudoku and it creates it, which it did, you know, complete. Is this something you could monetize? Is this something that you say, "Well, now this is a game"? Whose IP is this, and have you infringed on someone else's IP? So, again, not to throw cold water on this, because I think it is really amazing. Oh, I mean, that's amazing that it created complete with the direction of creating something in the vein of Sudoku. Really cool stuff, but both on two levels. On um, the intellectual property and exposure for liability as someone who might be using this, but also let's protect our artists. Let's protect the creators out there. Let's just us as end users just take a second thought to say, where is this coming from? How am I going to use this? And just think about it for a moment. That's all I'm asking, to pause. Because we artists are in a difficult situation here because ChatGPT. I'm a member of ACTRA, for example, the Alliance for Canadian Theatre and Radio Artists. They see this as a threat. They don't see it as I've been talking about. Here's all the possibilities. So let's embrace it, but we have to think about it a bit more. But there's definitely a place where this is going to be a part of our professional lives for artists and for actors and those that work putting out creativity into the world. And again, how they make a living is their uniqueness, their writing, their acting. That's how they get rewarded. If it's used by artificial intelligence without any credit or any remuneration, that hurts their livelihood. And it also kind of muddles the waters about what creativity is. Because again, until we have strong AI, which I've talked about in other LinkedIn Lives, this is not human ingenuity. This is not human creativity. It is awesome, but it's not what people can do in terms of the way we come up with ideas, the truly uniqueness of a human being, with the ways we come up with, sometimes amazing ideas that shape culture, help the world, sometimes not so good ideas, but ideas nonetheless. So yeah, I just thought I'd put that out there for all of us, including myself. This is also a message for myself. My thought was I'm going to start using Dali, and not use stock Adobe or Adobe stock Adobe stock, which is what I use for to license images for websites and LinkedIn and whatever else I use. And then I had to even put a break on it. It wasn't easy for me to see. Then I was like, wait a minute now. Am I taking other artists' work? And do I even know how this was compiled? And it wasn't necessarily from a legal exposure point of view. It's just from protecting artists, and that to me is important. Okay, that is the end of our LinkedIn Live. I do want to again come back to if you're in the U.S. or Canada and you're interested in attending one of our free webinar series. So if you go to, if you're in Canada, the site will look slightly different. Oh, that's interesting. I must have my VPN on. So right now I'm in the US side of the site. Um, and here is, these are for US CPAs, because I'm a NASBA sponsor. So you'll get your NASBA certificate for the 1 hour credit. Each of these free webinars are 1 hours. The first one coming up on May 9th, audit technical update. So um, there's also a Canadian equivalent if you're in Canada and go to the Canadian site. And let me just remove this. We have professional ethics. This one on May 17th is really an amazing one. I'll be working with Janelle Ambrose, who works in privacy, and we'll be talking about what CPAs need to know about evolving privacy risks, which is, again, important, especially as we talk about generative AI. I'll be talking on Friday, June 16th, about blockchain and cryptocurrency. And then on July 14th, check in on the great retention. How do we retain our staff and our people, especially at CPA firms? So those are all free. And the other thing that we'll note is that you also get a 1 hour of CPE credit, or if you're in Canada, there'll be a different webinar. It'll be the same webinar topic, just different time and different setup. Just this is regulatory. The U.S. is mandated their continuing professional education by NASBA. In Canada, there is no regulation, but it's called CPD. But for the US CPAs, if you attend one of the CPE courses, you'll also receive 1 credit for one of our free on demand courses. And we have several of them available. Just take a moment here to load up. Um, right now, there's 4 courses available: professional ethics, improving psychological safety in the workplace, leading teams to excellence, blockchain to transformative technology, and professional ethics, a Theranos story. So you'll get a credit for one of those if you attend one of our webinars. And we'll be adding, hopefully by the summer, we'll have about 15 on-demand courses ready for sale that qualify as CPE. So if that's of interest to you and you're looking for an early start on your CPE requirements, there you have it. You probably noticed I did not talk a lot about the Toronto Raptors today, if you're watching the tail end of this, because I want to avoid stress today. They really, really frustrated me. I won't get into it because it's not healthy. Anyway, I hope to be back. I'll post it on LinkedIn for my next LinkedIn Live on Tuesday next week. Until then, have a great rest of your week and see you soon. Take care, everyone.